Well, thank you all. That was absolutely brilliant. So Sophie, may I just start with you? I was quite intrigued by the data trust concept. And in principle, that sounds fantastic. The sharing of data across systems and organizations. But as you pilot this, what are kind of the challenges that you see?
Sure. Well, there isn't anything like this yet. There's no data trust out there. And the Office for AI have given us some support to really explore the challenges that are there. And the key things that we're seeing is really around the risks and the unintended consequences. People are scared to share their data. And we have to create an environment of trust for data owners and data users and give them a safe, fair, and equitable kind of legal framework to be able to do that. So, for example, some people are scared about sharing their data that the poachers might get hold of it, or there might be unintended consequences, and so they don't know which parts to remove or how to remove the location data to get that training data out there. Or there might be some value in the data that they haven't realized yet, maybe a missed revenue opportunity or a funding opportunity, so they keep that to themselves. And also there's a lot of confusion about privacy and the constraints and regulations around that. So we're really trying to demystify that and create safe frameworks to be able to share. And there's a real barrier with time as well. Many grants now make it obligatory to actually share your data at the end of your grant. But when it comes to it, the time and expertise to do that is not supported. So they often remain on hard drives under people's desks.
Yes, exactly.
So it's a difficult
make it available,
challenge.
but how to
so we can build that.
And I would emphasise that the importance of what you're doing really can't be overestimated. Certainly within the animal tracking world, although I've explained that migratory species connect the entire planet, most of us only study a few populations, or we only work within a few ocean basins. And the most pressing issues facing wildlife today, like climate change, are global. And they don't just happen within a year either, so they're also sort of pan-decadal as well. And it's only, I think, by sticking data together with fantastic projects like yours that we can really start to make a difference for wildlife conservation. So I really celebrate what you're doing.
Thank you, Lucy.
Other stakeholders or collaborators here for the data trust pilot.
Yeah.
Joseph, you're maybe at a different end of the spectrum data-wise. Sophie's talking about the volume of data and quality of it, but what's your situation in the Arctic?
Yeah, there's an interesting contrast to be drawn there, because in a normal machine learning workflow, the computationally expensive and the memory intensive part would be in the training phase, where you expose an algorithm to tens of millions of examples, and the expensive part is the algorithm working out what are the diagnostic variables that it can use to find something, to predict something. For us, the computationally expensive part is in the deployment, because we're trying to go pixel by pixel across an entire glacier or an entire ice sheet, or potentially all the ice on the planet, which is obviously hugely computationally demanding. But at the same time, our training set is limited, because we actually have to go out to the location to get the training data in the first place, which can be awkward, it can certainly be expensive, and in some situations it can be dangerous. And the data collection is quite fiddly as well, so there's a limit to how much we can actually gather in a day. What it does mean, the other side of the coin, is that every row in our training set is of the absolute highest quality, because we're there on the ground making the measurements, and we know that our label is absolutely reliable. Yeah. But we're limited in the volume of training data, and that's a problem.
Yeah, so you're actually starting the data set to be ultimately shared, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things is consistent metadata and a standard operating procedure for making those measurements in the first place, which then kind of elevates it from just being one project making a data set available to having a community training data that people can append to. When other projects get funded that are making similar measurements, it can all just be collated into one big training set, and the bigger that training set grows, the more confidence we can have in the algorithms that are predicted by it.
So Lucy, the technology is developed from the first tracking device of the spear. Where do you see where do you see your technology? What would you like to see kind of in this next phase of being able to track migratory species?
So I talked about moving beyond where animals are going to why they're going there, and we've had lots of successes in doing that so far. But I guess the market opportunity within wildlife tracking technology isn't that great. We're never going to make the kind of technological gains that you see in the consumer electronics industry. And so it's been very difficult for tags to become smaller and to become smarter and become longer lasting. And that's happened largely through efforts of some really, really cool key people. There are two things I think that are going to happen to animal tracking in the future that are going to make a huge difference. One of them is actually trying to integrate sports and medical technologies, particularly nanotechnologies. There are fantastic sensors out there. Anybody with diabetes ever heard of these patches you can pop on your arm, and they actually measure the glucose levels in your blood for about a week? Nobody's using those on animals, and those could be telling us some really cool things. So there hasn't been much transfer between those disciplines. And then the second really cool thing that's going to be happening quite shortly to the animal tracking world is the launch of a new system called Icarus. And this has been put together by a really visionary group of biologgers in Germany. And this hopefully will result in the world's smallest ever tracking tags that will report data to us for ever longer. So there's two really kind of exciting, I think, new things happening. For anybody out there who's interested in getting into animal tracking, it's an incredibly exciting career. I think. Yeah, you agree.
You can see it. You are, yes. Gautam, so you're harnessing technology for arguably a different audience, but I'm kind of interested in terms of how do you view that? Is it this audience that you're engaging, that they're playing, they're becoming kind of maybe in tune to wildlife, but is there something beyond that? Do you see an opportunity to provoke some kind of action or movement?
I think that can come directly or indirectly. But if we think about that indirectly, I really, really believe that the things I mentioned earlier, that markets are critical to what happens in conservation, right? Obviously, government policy is critical to what happens in conservation, and financing is critical to what happens in conservation, and all of these things are driven by mass audiences or by the constituents of that are close to them. So whether we are actively trying to get a consumer to take a particular step, like right now, don't use single-use plastic or things around palm oil, or their general behavior over time starts to drive the market's financing and policy to change. I think that's what we're trying to do. So I 100% we need to get beyond awareness, and we need to get beyond sort of these short awareness campaigns, which are kind of easy to claim success, but in reality, I don't think really move the dial, and really think about how all this type of behavior change happens over a long time, so the things that really drive conservation outcomes get impacted. Yeah. And I sit here and I get very, very excited thinking about all this data, and like, oh my God, there's all this stuff that we can do to take that data and expand the audience beyond scientists, or even beyond citizen scientists, and all that work I think is fantastic, and get it to these much larger audiences who can really, really have an impact on what happens.
Right. In fact, there's maybe a good wrap-up question for all of you. This theme of connecting to ignite change. I mean, as you met and listening to each other, what do you see kind of going off? I started thinking about all possible ideas among you as well as the previous speakers. Any thoughts?
I mean, we're going to do something with Arctic terns for sure.
Well, I was going to say, can you
there's
turn
no
my
doubt
Arctic
about
terns
it.
into a game?
Absolutely.
That would be fantastic.
I think there's never been a better time to bring everyone together, and through the brilliant work of data collection and unparalleled collaboration, we can really harness this huge opportunity that is ahead of us. And it's time to deliver. It's time to scale these things and come together and work together to make a change.
That's a great way to end it, I think. So again, thank you for your presentations. And if I get a final round of applause for our panelists.